I am Clarence Larson, Director of the Pioneers of Science and Technology Videotape Project. About 300 years ago, Isaac Newton wrote that we make progress only by standing on the shoulders of giants. This project is dedicated to preserving on videotape some of the wisdom of those contemporary giants and pioneers who during the past half-century were responsible for the advances in science and technology which have revolutionized our lives. This interview gives us an insight into the contribution which these individuals have made to our civilization. We now join the interview in progress.
Fremont, Nebraska, and my father was in the high school. He principal of high school and football coach. And I got married. My mother from Woodbine. They went on their honeymoon from Woodbine, Iowa, over to Fremont on the train.
Oh, yes.
Whole bunch of stuff. Yeah, they got a picture of it. And then my father had greater vision of what he wanted to do, so I only lived there a year. Then he moved to Council Bluffs, and he had a job, and he got fired from that. Then he moved to Lincoln, and he thought he'd like to do some writing, newspaper type things. Reporting, where you find out what's going on and pass it on to the people. So, and he covered the State House, and he met a young man up there who became the senator, and won a job in Washington. You know where that is?
Oh yes, that's quite the familiar pattern in politics.
So he came as his assistant to help him write up what he's doing, and so the family moved to Washington when I was about 4, I guess, or 5.
Yeah, so you had an early start in the Washington scene.
Yeah, we lived in a bunch of old houses, old row houses, all the same. In fact, we had trouble with the neighbor. He used to imbibe a little too deep, and he couldn't figure out which house was his.
Oh yes, and with these row houses,
every once in a while he'd come into our house and wander around there at 2 o'clock in the morning trying to find his bed.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't funny in those days.
Yeah.
So I had a good view, good impression of Washington. But those jobs, senator job only lasts 3 years, 2 years, or something. And they're
yeah, well, I believe, of course, that the congressmen, 2-year stints, they get reelected for 4 or something.
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Well, Mr. Brown didn't. He didn't get elected. Mm-hmm. And we have some pictures of ladies in those days. They wore great big hats and big blowing dresses.
Oh, yeah.
It was really something. I enjoyed the pictures of Washington.
Yes, but that was probably about the early 1920s then, was it?
Oh, 1900. Yeah, I was born in 1903, about 1910, yeah. Mm-hmm. And my mother was disappointed when I arrived. She was expecting a little girl.
Oh, yeah.
And here came out this boy. So she made up for it by letting my hair grow. I had blonde, curly hair, beautiful curls. So she dressed me in little velvet suits, and got a lot of enjoyment out of pretending I was a little girl.
And those are the types of pictures that people sometimes try to hide in later life.
Well, I got to be about 5 or 6. My father said, "That's enough of that." So he took me down to the barber shop, and they cut up the whole pile.
Oh, yeah.
And so my mother and father had their first big fight when I came home with no hair. But you can't undo that kind of thing.
That's right.
But he did have all these in a box, these curls, and he presented my mother.
Oh, yeah.
So I did get a little sister shortly, so everything was smoothed out.
Oh, yes.
Well,
Now, then, did you go to elementary school then in Washington?
I must have done some schooling here, but I don't remember. And then we moved back to Nebraska. Oh, he was looking for a job he took night school at George Washington University in law.
Oh yeah.
So he became an attorney, and the only job that he could find here, connected with my mother, said you have to go back to the Middle West.
Oh yeah.
She had noticed why you did this. So the only job that showed up was to be a legal representative in the Indian reservation in Winnebago, Nebraska.
Oh yeah.
You've never been there, probably, have you?
No, I've just driven through Nebraska.
So. Yeah. It's a bunch of brick buildings in the middle of a whole bunch of land where Indians live.
Oh yeah.
And they gave each Indian a house and a horse and a cow, and thought they'd make a farmer out of them.
Oh yes.
But they weren't interested in that. They slept in a teepee out in the yard, and they put the horse and the cow in the house, and had their normal way of life with all their Indian ways.
That must have been an interesting.
Yeah, I started school there, an integrated school. It was me and about 30 Indians.
Oh yeah.
6-year-old Indian, 5-year-old Indian. So I learned how to wrestle, and I learned how to do the various things the Indians did.
Well, that was a very interesting experience in your early elementary school years.
Yeah, it's different than most kids.
Yeah.
I was an outsider, and I had to work my way in.
Yeah.
And of course, I had blonde hair and thin white skin. These Indians are all dark complected and black hair, and the fleas found out that I was a little tenderer than the
Oh yeah,
Indians.
so
they all moved over onto me when we wrestled, and my mother never could get used to me going to bed at night and we're getting up in the morning to shake the sheets and it'd be full of fleas.
Oh yeah.
These women are funny about that.
Yeah, that's very tough. Very tough.
So she hesitated to get away from Winnebago. She had none of that. So we moved to Lincoln, and then I started school again in a more civilized condition.
Was that about in junior high school then? About?
Oh no, I was still
in the elementary.
I went to junior high school. We moved to Aurora, Nebraska, which is. We were in Lincoln for a while, but then my father got this opportunity to join this law firm in Aurora, Nebraska, and that's where I really did my schooling and undergraduate schooling. And the town of 3,000 people. And I must say my father was a very vigorous guy, and he always wanted me to do something, which I think helped in my education, and I hope pass that on to other people. No matter what it was, he was always thinking, what can I get Harold to be doing? Well, first job that showed up was a printer's devil.
Oh, yes.
Taking the type apart, cleaning the type, and putting it back into the fonts. And that lasted for a while until that company went broke. And then I worked on a farm. I was just barely big enough to walk getting that harness up before dawn, putting on those horses and going out and plowing. It was a real experience.
Yes, that's right. Working on a farm is you run into a tremendous variety of experience.
Yeah.
And you learn to have to make do with a lot of things.
So that was a very valuable thing. And that, of course, we finally got all the wheat planted. He also used to take every spare lot around the town, and he'd hire a plow, and then me and my two sisters would take potatoes and cut out the eyes.
Oh yeah.
And as the plowing along, we'd stick these potato eyes in the
thing,
and then the next one would cover it up, so nobody had to do any digging. Mm-hmm. Beautiful potatoes came up.
Oh, wonderful!
And we had potatoes all over the place. We do this all for 5 o'clock in the morning,
Oh, that's.
I can still remember this one guy that laid in bed in the second story window and would sing, "Oh, I love to get up in the morning, but it's much nicer to lay in bed." My father was driving us all to get this work done.
Oh yes. Well, in order to make a farm go, you You have to get up bright and early in the morning.
Well, that's finally disappeared, this work, and there were several incidents along, but I started working in radio, and I accumulated all kinds of radio equipment that other people had bought and couldn't make it work, and I ended up in my parents' bedroom with an antenna out on the roof. Beautiful antenna.
This is the early days of radio, presumably.
Yeah, they were just starting buzz, 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 buzz. I thought all radio had to come through as buzzing.
Yes.
And suddenly I heard a voice, and I practically laid an egg right there. I couldn't conceive how you could get a voice to be transmitted by radio.
Yes, I know that there's been several people that gone through this experience. I've been an amateur radio operator since I was 11 years old myself, and still have a license. But the early days were a real thrill.
Oh, it was a miracle. Yeah, that was a miracle. Of course, videos came later, and that was still further down the line.
That's right.
But I had a personal letter from President Roosevelt telling me to take my antenna down when World War I came on.
Oh, yes.
Because they thought I would be communicating military secrets from Aurora, Nebraska to the Germans.
Yeah, that's right. All that was...
I felt pretty important about that, you know.
We both had to... I didn't get it wasn't operating in World War I, but in World War II we had to stop operating.
Yeah, take everything down.
That's right. Well, fine. Well, then this was still while you were in high school, right?
Yeah, I was in high school.
There. And what high school did you graduate from?
Aurora, Nebraska. It's a town of 3,000 people, and of course the high school had students from all the surrounding area, farm areas, came into there.
Yeah. How much science and math were you able to get in that high school?
Well, not too much, but a smattering.
Oh, yeah.
And my father knew I was interested in electricity, so he went down to the electric light plant and got his foot in the door when they weren't looking, and said, I've got a high school kid that knows a lot about electricity. I knew how to hook up a radio.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure it was imagination. But anyway, they said, well, we don't really need an expert driver, but we do need a janitor to come down here at 6 o'clock in the morning and sweep out every morning. So as far as sure, that'll be fine. So he'd get me up every morning and pull me out of bed. I slept on the back porch and rushed down this plant and sweep out. It was a coal plant, so the thing was just full of dust. And you just see it as soon as you clean it.
Yeah.
You turn around, you could write your name on there.
Yeah. Coal-fired power plants never can be cleaned up. The dust keeps coming and coming and coming.
Yeah.
But so then and then did you go directly on from high school to college then?
Yeah.
Yes, and you didn't stay out or anything?
Well, of course, the war came on, and the lineman went to war, and he gave me his hooks to climb poles.
Oh, yeah.
And he was a high school kid.
Oh, yeah.
Out working on 2,300-volt lines and working all night, fixing up things. And I learned the philosophy of the electric company, the lights always have to be put on.
Oh, yeah.
Whenever there's an emergency, everybody works.
Oh, yeah.
Until the white lights are on.
Oh, yeah.
And it's been a valuable lesson for me to learn. You don't, when 5 o'clock comes, it means nothing. You keep right on going all night, all day, and all night until those lights are on. It's a marvelous philosophy they have.
Yes, well, the test is...
And it got embedded into me so deep that it's caused me all kinds of trouble.
Yes. Well, keeping the lights on is a good philosophy to go
They have to keep them on.
Fine. Well, then, when you went to college, did you have an idea of your career?
Well, I went to the University of Nebraska. First of all, it cost nothing. It was tuition was zero.
Yeah.
And I was going to be electrical. There were a lot of things I didn't understand about these generators and motors and things.
Oh, yeah.
And I was curious. So I went into the electrical engineering department. When I went to Lincoln, and when I got down there, I was deceived because they just passed a law that the tuition goes from $0 to $25 a term.
Oh, outrageous.
And that was a depression.
Yes.
Every nickel went by. Our family was squeezed about 6 times.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a crisis, so I had to work. I wired houses most of the time. I was in college. I brag it, I saw just one football game between Notre Dame and Nebraska.
Oh, yes.
And I saw it through an eyepiece of movie camera. Oh, yeah. They won a movie of it because they thought they were going to beat Notre Dame.
Oh, yeah.
But they didn't. Mm-hmm. So all that film went into the wastebasket. Oh. But I saw one game through the viewfinder.
Oh, yes. Well, that's in Nebraska, of course, had these powerhouses during.
Oh, the great big players, and that was a very highly advertised contest.
Oh, yes.
So I missed that part, but I didn't miss anything.
But you did then take the standard course at that time in electrical engineering.
Electrical engineering.
All your math and your physics and your electrical engineering and all the rest.
I'm still mystified by a lot of it, but it's still there,
Yeah, electrical engineering course has changed a great deal.
Oh, it changed terrifically.
In the meantime, I have a son who got a PhD, got his undergraduate work from MIT in electrical engineering. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I swear he did never see an electric motor through his little course there.
Yeah, well,
solid state circuitry and quantum theory and so forth.
Oh, they get more and more complicated every day. But the few old timers around there like me that can still remember how to hook 2 wires together and put electricity in one end, it comes out the other.
Oh, yeah, fine.
Yeah.
Good. Well, then you did all your undergraduate work then at
Nebraska.
MIT, did you?
I got my degree.
At Nebraska.
University of Nebraska, got my degree.
Yes.
And then the employers came around to give us, and I was interviewed, and my father said I had to go back to Boston Tech. Well, I didn't heard of it. And the story I tell is that we had a student the year before I went to Harvard. We came back to MIT, came back to Aurora. I saw him on the street and I said, what about this engineering school at Boston Tech? Oh, he said, it's not there anymore. They moved it over into Cambridge, they call it the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And then he looked me right in the eye and got real close and said real loud, and they only take smart ones. If anybody ever tried to discourage anybody,
yes.
Well, I learned by experience that my father said, whatever anybody says, don't be bothered by it. Just go right ahead and do what you want to do.
Oh, yeah.
So I learned from that you shouldn't believe everything you hear from a Harvard man.
Yeah. Well, there was the famous saying about Harvard man, you could, let's see, what is it? What's that famous saying about Harvard men who you can always tell a Harvard man, but you can't tell him much. You know? So,
they're a wonderful school.
Yes.
And they're very old and they're associated closely with MIT.
Oh, yes.
But we joke them all the time.
Yeah. Fine. Well, then you essentially finished the standard course at MIT. Any particularly outstanding events at MIT that you remember?
Well, I was interested in motors. And at that time, they had a lot of motors.
Oh, yeah.
This was in 1927.
Oh, yeah.
And the motors were the main generators. Well, they're still the main thing. There's electricity here. It's coming out of a generator somewhere. And you have to keep them going.
Oh, yeah.
But now it's getting to be a routine. In those days, there was still a lot of mystery about it.
Yes. Well, that's right. Of course, the development of motors in the United States has been absolutely fabulous. But we take it all for granted.
Yeah, it's like the air. It comes in for free.
Yeah. And, you know, when I tell somebody, I could bet I can go into your house and find 30 motors and 30 electric, well, they don't believe me. You go electric clocks, you know, refrigerator, all the rest of the things, and
all specialized.
Yeah, everything. You know, every television set has a motor in, every crank, everything. It's fantastic. What motors have done to our civilization. Well, at any rate, so you that was your main interest in motors there, electric motors at MIT. And what year did you graduate from MIT?
In 27.
In 27.
I spent a year.
Oh, yeah.
I did spend a year in General Electric Company.
Oh, yes.
And I worked in this big generator department. So they're big as this room, these generators. Mm-hmm. And in those days, they took young college graduates and put them in what they call the test department. Oh, yeah. And they had to hook up all these things and run them under full load before they'd ship them. So we learned an awful lot.
Oh, yeah.
Tremendous amount. And I'd been there about 4 months. And working along, and the boss came in one day and says, "We're looking for a night, somebody to be in charge of the night crew. The pay will go up to 55 cents an hour, and you'll get overtime every day." And
oh yeah,
I said, "Fine, sure, I'll take it." And I learned the next day that they made the same offer to everybody in the place. And nobody wanted to work 12 and a half hours a night. So I went for 6 months on a night shift.
Oh yeah.
Where I had a crew of about 10 people, and I had to plan their work and get the thing all ready and run it. Yeah. I learned an awful lot that way.
Fine. Well then, fine. Well then, after you left that, then you went on to graduate school.
Yeah, then I went to MIT as a graduate student. And I think all this practical work that I'd done in the electric company in Aurora and in Schenectady was a tremendous help.
Oh yeah.
Because all the rest of these kids come in with pencils and paper and trying to do it. And I had the whole laboratory wired up. And
oh yeah.
I was doing some experiments with these motors. What happens when you change the load suddenly on them?
Oh yeah.
It's a fascinating thing. And the professor says, "Well, yeah, but you can't work out the mathematics of that because it's a nonlinear differential equation." And I ran across an article in English that said that. And then I remember Vannevar Bush was just developing his first integrating machine.
Oh, yes.
Calculating machine. Yeah. And I went in and solved the second degree nonlinear equation with a sine term in it. Oh, sure, that's a piece of cake. It's nothing.
Oh, yeah.
So I said, "Can we do that for a thesis?" Yeah. So sure enough, we had a big motor down there with all these things, and solved these beautiful equations of this nonlinear equation, which cannot be done by formal mathematics because of limitations.
Yeah, that was with Vannevar Bush, analog calculating.
Yeah, that was his integraph, he called it. Yeah. It was a two-stage integraph, 2 integrating stages, where it would solve differential equations.
Oh, yeah.
The second degree.
And that, of course, tremendous advantage also in analyzing the various types of special network circuits.
Oh yeah, it's a headquarters of main spring of the calculator came out of that. All this calculating we have now. Yeah. So I was in on the early part of it.
Fine. Well, that's very good. Then you got in on the very early part of modern calculating machines, which later, of course, turned into computers and so on.
The digital got going and the analog went out.
Yeah, these were analog computers. And digital took over, of course.
I can remember distinctly Bush had this contract with the Carnegie Institution, put up a tremendous sum of money for him to build an 80-stage integrating machine.
Oh, yeah.
Of analog type. And he had a big crew of people working on it, and they were just driving like mad. And suddenly he came in one morning and said, "It's over. It's finished." The new digital scheme got to him, and they could do it so much better in another way. They just stopped that thing. Clunk.
Oh, yes. That was a very rapid transition from analog to digital.
Bing.
Yes.
It was dramatic to me because all these people were into it up to their neck, and suddenly they had to learn something new.
That's right. Now those are the changes in technology that take place almost overnight sometimes. Well, so you got your PhD then. What was your thesis at MIT?
Well, it was on sudden load on the synchronous motor.
Oh, yes.
And all equations are written in terms of phase angle between the rotating magnetic field and the pole structure.
Oh, yeah.
And when it goes too far, it goes out of step, and you get all kinds of gyrations.
Oh, yeah.
And we solved all those equations with this integraph.
Right.
And then I wanted to check them. You know, whenever you do anything like that, you always wonder, does the real world do what the mathematics says?
Oh, yes.
And that's how I got into doing it with a strobe. The only way you can measure that angle is by shining a light onto it and see where the pole is.
Oh, yes.
And see where it is a function of time.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, it came out sharp and clear, and we got curves, and there was some similarity.
Yeah, and so that was your first work with the strobe.
That's the first work with the strobe, was
oh, yeah.
find things you couldn't see.
Oh, yes. Well, of course, that's it's really spectacular to observe the performance of your first strobe.
Yeah, and, it was like magic.
Yeah.
People came in all over.
Yeah.
I can still say, come in, where's that machine that takes a picture in 10 microseconds?
Yeah,
it's right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's and so that really was the start of your strobe work.
That was the key. The key element was to be able to take a picture in less than a few microseconds.
Oh, yes.
And then immediately, all my friends, all over the school, everywhere, all of them had problems that they needed to see something or it was going too fast.
Oh, yeah.
And pretty soon, we were helping everybody, helping them here and helping them here and helping them there. So gradually, they always wanted something different. So it was always a challenge.
Oh, yeah. So that's how you got started in developing all of this technology that you developed with connection with strobes and high-speed photography and so forth. And how do you regard this stepwise as to how you worked with this? In other words, you just mentioned how you got started, and what are some of the significant steps along the line in your development of this whole fascinating field?
I never even thought of that, but I can still remember people come in and look at this motor. And they'd say, what of it? They say, why don't you go out and look at the rest of the world? There's all kinds of things happening quick. And I'd say, like what? But I was so concentrated on motors, that's all I could see.
Oh, yes.
And I can still remember, I said, oh, what else is it? Well, there's a faucet over there, water coming out of the faucet. So just take a picture of it. It's in my book, and it's sharp and crystal.
Yeah, that's one of the That's one of the classics.
We just turned around, took a picture, and gone.
Yeah.
Seconds.
Yeah.
And there it is. And whenever anybody says, what's the use of it? Well, it shows you what's going on.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's no use at all. Sometimes it's tremendous value.
Well, fine. So I mean, just that's a simple thing of the water faucet, which is I would say, it's a classic picture because everybody knows that picture. So that we go from there, and then what are some of the other sort of milestones as you go along in this year? Well,
then somebody came in and they said, why don't you use it for taking pictures, ordinary pictures, instead of these flash bulbs full of oxygen and aluminum foil? Mm-hmm. And I said, sure, but look at all the equipment you have to haul around, these big boxes full of capacitors and generators and stuff, make it go. Mm-hmm. And there were all kinds of people that were way ahead of me. Think, why don't you design it down to a little thing like that? Well, I didn't know how. And they do it now, and I still don't know how it's done.
Oh, yeah.
It's hammering away at the components.
Oh, yeah.
But I think one thing helped it. Photography got better.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember there was one article came out about 25 years ago, and the author said, films are so much faster and better and finer grained, and the lenses are better and get more light. Mm-hmm. There's no need anymore for flash bulbs of the chemical type. or electrical type. You just use a light that comes free, and a flash is finished. Mm-hmm. Well, just the opposite happens.
Oh, yes.
Because now you can make a camera.
Yeah.
It's just about that big.
Yes.
And have an extremely small electronic flash, which is easy to do electrically. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so now you go into a store to buy a camera, it's practically impossible to get a camera without a flash attached to it.
Oh, yes. So that's right.
So it's changed completely the story of photography.
Well, so how, with regard to some of the other, I think you got started in some of the industrial applications of this.
The stroboscope. The stroboscope, I knew it would be useful for setting all kinds of periodic machinery, spinning machines and lathes and everything. Mm-hmm. Just looking at it, you can measure the speed, you can see the distortion. And I knew it was going to go, but it took a long time to get it done. The story I tell is I was very loyal to General Electric because they supported me for a year. So when I went back after I got my degree, and I showed them how you could make a stroboscope out of a mercury tube with an isolator driving it, and we demonstrated on a few little things. And the man said, "Sure, yeah." And he called in an assistant and said, "Here's Joe Smith. He just made a market analysis of this instrument. And you're asking us to make one? Well, we have found out that they only need 100 of them in the country, and the General Electric company can't stop and just want to piddling little 100 units. Mm-hmm. So he said, why don't you go back to Cambridge and find some small company that doesn't have a market analysis department, mm-hmm. and get them to make it." Yeah. And so I did, and sure enough, that's what it was. They sold about 100 the first year.
Oh, yeah.
And it was, everybody considered a failure, mm-hmm. but it takes a long lead time. You have to educate all the people. Now stroboscopes are everywhere.
Oh, yes, just widespread.
Why didn't we realize it first? Well,
yes. Well, that's the...
Takes time.
That's the story of a good many things. I remember, the experiences of people like, in addition to yourself, people like Beckman and Hewlett and Packard. They started out with some of these very small markets. Beckman put a few pH meters together. In fact, I made a few myself during my graduate school days, and some people wanted to buy them, so I made a few. I think I made 3 of them and sold them. I think, well, there's a total market maybe of 5. Yeah. And so, but how wrong. Beckman took it, and,
the way it went.
Into the millions,
right. It's all a matter.
And so forth.
You have to educate the market.
And in the same way with Hewlett, with regard to many of the things that started with simple audio oscillators, and then just branched out all over.
That's right.
And, so you never can predict.
Yeah, I knew Hewlett when he was designing those on the back of an envelope.
Yeah.
We were going down to a electrical convention in Washington, New York, or somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
Here he was drawing a feedback circuit of an oscillator.
Oh, yeah.
How to make it work.
Yes. Yeah,
it was just a piece of paper and an idea.
Yes.
And it moved into millions.
Yes. Well, on my last trip out to California, I talked to Hewlett. I wanted to interview him, but he was going to be out of town, so I'm going to do him on my next trip to California. Yeah. But I'm very anxious to hear.
Yeah, Packard was the businessman. Hewlett was the electrical engineer.
I'd like to hear his story, particularly that audio oscillator.
Yeah, that's right.
And how he got there.
Yeah.
But that's the sort of thing. So you just expanded from some of these original ideas into all kinds of different applications.
And most of them came in, I was trying to help people. People that had problems.
Oh, yes.
And in MIT, there's all kinds of people working on problems all the time.
Oh, yes.
All these problems are coming up. Just last week, I went over to the metallurgy department. They had some crazy idea they wanted to try.
Oh, yeah.
So sure enough, same old routine.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's fascinating to keep with that. Now, with regard to some of your other things, then I know you got into such a variety of applications to photography and so forth. What's some of the special equipment that you designed in order to carry out some of this fantastic photography that we've seen through the years?
Yeah. Well, I got most of that in a book, Electronic Flash Strobe. You ever seen it?
No, I never have.
Well, it's written for low-level, easy to understand electrical circuits. And I tried to cover principles and then a few specialties. And there's some circuits and stuff in there that probably never be used. In fact, I was just considering writing a paper on all the ideas I've had that I was very enthusiastic about and worked a long time. And then they were put in the back shelf.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's...
Like I remember I made a machine to study dynamite caps. I took 2 pictures, 2 microseconds apart, to measure how fast the dynamite cap exploded. And I went to some of my friends in a manufacturing company and said, you ought to build this machine and make it available. And they said, how many people want them? Well, I said, I know of 2, and I've already made units and given them to them.
Yes. Well, that's right.
They threw me out right away.
Yeah, some of the...
too specialized.
That's right. There's some of these marvelous scientific and technical achievements. They're wonderfully stimulating to the mind, but they don't at least at this point in time, they don't have use in our society.
Did you see a NOVA program? It was on the TV about 6 months ago.
Which one is that?
NOVA, about high-speed photography about me.
Oh, yes. This
had a whole lot of scenes in it.
Oh, yes.
That were taken with a high-speed movie camera.
Yes.
That goes 1,000 frames a second.
Oh, yes.
Well, that's the thing that's dead. It's it's a similar principle. It's ridiculous. If you take moving pictures, you stop the film for each picture.
Yes.
Well, if you stop it 24 times a second, that's easy. But if you try to stop it 1,000 times a second, you have a lot of problems with acceleration. So you can't do it. So the answer is, let the film run without stopping and flash the light a few minutes of a second, you print the pictures on it without stopping the film. That's the whole concept of it.
Yeah, that's the only way it can be done.
No, you do it with mirrors, with rotating mirrors. But there are other methods to beat it out. But there's a basic principle that's still fundamental, and it's just sitting waiting. But it'll hatch one of these days.
Oh, yeah.
It'll hatch.
Yes, as a matter of fact, in the lecture I attended at the National Academy of Engineering, where you gave your talk, you showed some of the examples there.
Yeah, some of the movies,
Some of the movies there also. And we've also the details of your worm gun and so forth. Very fascinating exposition there.
But if you have a subject with light in it, then you can't do that because light will smear.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So when you take an explosion of any kind, you have to go to another technique. But there are this is the beautiful part about experimental work. You never run short of something to do.
Yeah. Well, see, I was just reading about interesting ways that people looked at these different photographs, and you were mentioned. I think the story is that you accidentally ran into Grosvenor, who got interested in your high-speed photography, which hadn't really had much public distribution before. And I was wondering if you could say a few words about that, because I thought that's a fascinating example of how you have to. There are various and sundry ways to call attention of scientific and technical developments to the attention of people.
Yes, I met him accidentally up in Rochester at the Eastman House.
Oh, yeah.
They were having a big convention up there. Mm-hmm. And all the salesmen were around drinking whiskey as they do and talking and having a good time. And I noticed one little man over at the side, not talking to anybody, and I went over and said, "My name's Harold Edgerton. I'd like to..." "What do you do?" Well, he says, "I'm Gilbert Grosvenor." And I said, "Gilbert Grosvenor, isn't that the name of the man that has that yellow-covered magazine down there in Washington?" Yeah, he said, "That's me." "Well, fine." I said, "I'm delighted to have this opportunity to see you because I've been writing a lot of letters to the Geographic Society." Well, he said, "What happened?" "Well, I get nice letters back from some secretaries saying thank you." I was trying to tell them about electronic flash and how it can stop pictures of birds. So the wings will be sharp and clear and you can see every detail on them. Or the pictures now are blurred and not any good. "Well," he said, "when you write again, put on the envelope Gilbert Grosvenor personal."
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we developed a friendship, and he got in touch with some professor down at Cornell that took pictures of birds. And
oh, yeah.
they had a picture of a robin coming into a nest where you could see every hair and every whisker. And the title of the article was "New Era in Bird Photography."
Oh, yeah.
So it all happened just like that. Mm-hmm. It's just a chance meeting with this elderly gentleman who happened to be tremendously interested in bird photography.
Well, that was fine. I think that did a lot to acquaint the public with the possibilities of this.
And it's still happening. I had a man from California wrote me and he said the flash units they buy in the drugstore now have exposure time of about or even 10,000 a second. Yeah. And the wings are blurred of hummingbirds because the wings are beating 60 times a second. He says, "What can you do?" Well, I said, "You have to have a special strobe, but a little shorter and a little wider and a little higher voltage, and it's all described in my book, Electronic Flash, on page so-and-so."
Oh, yeah.
And so he wrote me in about a month. He said, "I got the book, and I went down to the drugstore. The drugstore doesn't carry those flash lamps and you've mentioned, and the capacitors and the special things." Well, of course they don't.
No.
So he said, "What am I going to do?"
You go to Radio Shack.
Yeah. So I said, "Well, I'm leaving. I'm going on a trip for about a month. So I just wrapped my equipment up in a box and sent it to him." Mm-hmm. And when I came back, I had some of the most magnificent pictures of hummingbirds I'd ever seen. Oh, yeah. Because he knew where the birds lived, how they reacted, where to put the lights. Oh, yeah. And he got a whole book of birds. I've forgotten what town he's from. His name's Tyrrell, and he's written 3 or 4 books since. Oh, yeah. Well, that's a very fascinating story about how you solved that problem for him. Yeah. And, well, it's all in the book. It's all a matter of the physics of flash lamps, how you make them flash short or a long time. We have the same problem with bullet photography. People go down to the drugstore and buy a little strobe flash unit, and they go out and try to take pictures of bullets. Oh, yeah. Well, a bullet moves about 6 inches while the light's on, and it gives a blur. Oh, yeah. So they're discouraged. When they send me these pictures, I just say, "Congratulations, you succeeded in showing what happens when the flash is too long. You've got the most beautiful blur picture I've ever seen. Congratulations." Right. Well, this incidentally, it's Crawford Greenwald, who is also interested in birds. Oh, yes. He's ever do any work with him by? Oh, yeah. He was on the corporation at MIT. Yes, I know he's an MIT. So every time he comes to MIT, they have a corporation meeting. Then he came down to my lab. Oh, yeah. And we looked at these results, and in fact, I made him some equipment, special equipment, battery equipment to take down to Brazil. Oh, yeah. He's had a lifetime interest in bird photography. His wife is really old now, and I understand he's kind of slowed up. Oh, yeah. But he had a book named Hummingbirds. Mm-hmm. You've probably never seen it. I've never. It's out of print, and it's a very rare book now. Uh-huh. So if you can see one, grab it, because
I saw him. It was about 5 years ago. I
Yeah.
saw him. As a matter of fact, I've mentioned to you at this panel that I chaired on the 40th anniversary of the chain reacting pile. He was one of the speakers there. So
he had tremendous experience.
Yeah, but I haven't seen him since then, actually. But speaking about that incident, did you ever, as a high-speed photographer, did you participate in any of the shots of the atomic bomb testing or anything?
Oh yeah, and we developed special. I developed a special shutter called a magneto-optic shutter.
Oh yeah.
You've probably seen these pictures of the atom bombs with the things sticking out of them.
Oh yeah.
Those are all taken in with a special shutter that's a few millionths of a second exposure.
Oh yeah.
But it has to be done mechanically. You can't do it mechanically. It's done electronically.
Yeah.
With a magneto-optic effect. Faraday invented this, or studied it long time ago. If you rotate the plane of polarization between two polarizers on a piece of glass, you can let the light go through and turn it off.
Oh yeah.
And I presented one of these cameras to the Smithsonian down here.
Oh yeah.
It's a big camera about that long with a 2,000 volt capacitor that discharges through a coil of wire and rotates the plane of polarization. Gets these marvelous pictures of atom bombs.
Oh yeah.
Most people just look at them and they don't know. It's just a picture.
Oh yeah.
But there's a lot of work to get there.
It must have been a tremendous. Well, that's a very ingenious way to approach that problem. That gave a tremendous amount of information in there with regard to the nature.
So I've been at NOE talk in all those places.
Oh yeah.
Took hundreds of pictures of those things.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's we don't do that in the laboratory. It's
that's
considered dangerous.
Yes. But that's a fascinating application to that. With regard to some of your developments you've carried over in your broader outlook of science and technology, you've carried over into the business field. Let's see, it's this company which is founded Edgerton, Greerhausen, and that's a part of your particular activities.
Yeah, MIT was asked to do a lot of this atom bomb study.
Yeah.
And they said, no, we're in the educational business, and we're not going to expand and get a lot of people out in the field.
Yes.
We're going to tend right to business. Why don't you hire some of our younger people, let them do it?
Oh, yes.
So they picked the three of us out, and so MIT released artists. They said, Atomic Energy Commission, here are the three young men who've got a little bit of ability, and they've already taken pictures of atom bombs. So let them get in on the firing and the dying. And so we organized Greer, for example, wired up NOE Taketo. In the original days, the physicists were trying to do it with radio.
Oh, yeah.
You can imagine trying to with all the inner complications of radio.
Oh, yeah.
And Greer went in, and he just sat in the back row, and when they got all through talking, it sounded like it was impossible to not have a lot of accidents and things. We said, it's very simple. We just take some cable out there, and you want to like those signals go from here to there, you just put a cable along it.
Yeah. That's a simple way to do it.
That's the answer. That's what happened.
Yeah.
The three of us organized a company to lay cables and wire up, and we talk. So when you want something to happen over there, it happens.
Oh, yes.
It's an engineering job.
Oh, yes.
And a physicist doesn't like to work that way.
Yeah, and you try to get a little fancy in theory, but with all the interferences that you get, you couldn't afford to have something like that happen.
Dangerous business.
With a critical thing.
Very dangerous.
So you had to have it hardwired.
Hardwired, all hardwired. Well, it costs money, but it probably costs less.
Yeah. And then, of course, then from there, I guess you expanded into other aspects.
Oh yeah, all kinds of things.
In fact, I was at Oak Ridge, and I can remember I believe you acquired one of the instrumentation companies down there.
Yeah.
It was Ortec.
Yeah.
And
we've got some business people that are trying to run it like a business.
Yeah.
And it's working out pretty good.
And it's, I guess that was to exploit these very highly sensitive scintillation counters.
Yeah.
See, incidentally, along that line, one of the pioneers in that field, Dr. Hofstadter, did you ever come across him by any chance? He did a lot of work in the field of scintillation counters. In fact, I think got a Nobel Prize out of that.
Right.
And some of his work related to that. And he's we talked about some of his cooperation with your Oak Ridge group. Some of the development of that very fine business now, which has made a tremendous contribution in medicine and all kinds of.
Well, it's supposed to be on a firm foundation and scientific basis, so that you get results.
Yeah. So that's fine.
I used to be associated with them, but I'm not anymore. I'm retired, but I keep track of them, and they're moving right along.
Yes. Let's see. Well, what are some of the other aspects of the various and sundry scientific and technological adventures you've had along the line with some of your work? I think you've told a great many of them. Any there that we might have skipped?
Well, I've always been fascinated in underwater experiments and observation and photography.
Oh yeah,
it's a terrible, complicated place to work. And I just finished writing up an article on the bathyscaphs. I worked with them.
Oh yeah.
From ever since they were organized till when they got finished.
Oh yeah.
The whole era of the bathyscaph it occurred when Auguste Piccard conceived the idea of using a bag full of gasoline to hold up a sphere that had walls thick enough to withstand the pressure of the ocean and to bring it back to the surface. And they built several of these bathyscaphs, and the final one was taken by his son, and a young Navy lieutenant, and the Navy backed it up, and they went out and dived 7 miles deep. So nobody's done anything with bathyscaphs ever since. It's an interesting thing. It's something that was conceived, built, and tried, and they built about 4 of them, and then they finally went to the deepest place in the 7 miles deep, and then they quit. But I complained that they were only down there about 10, 20 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
And they were cold, and they were unhappy, and they were looking through a little hole, and they were not too good observers.
Oh, yeah.
And there's still a lot of the bottom of the ocean is still uncorked.
Yeah.
But you've seen this work by Bob Ballard down to where he found all this fantastic animal life.
Oh yes, and then of course then it also
inconceivable things. Yeah.
Ultimately, his work on the Titanic.
And he found the Titanic.
But those are fantastic.
But he's a driver. He gets up early in the morning. He works hard.
Yeah, and he used some of the equipment principles that you developed.
Oh sure.
There.
And he doesn't even mention them, which is a compliment because it means they're now accepted.
They're just commonly accepted.
Deep sea cameras 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, you calculate how thick they have to be and how fat. It's impossible to make them.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I've done some scuba diving myself, but only to the extent that I take it down.
You go down 50 feet. You're good.
I've been down to almost 100, but when you get down below, 30, then your colors vanish unless you have color correction equipment. But of course, you had the sophisticated controls, so you had all that taken care of. But that is a fascinating.
Well, there's still a lot of the Earth that's never been explored.
Yes, but even the the simple photography that you do, 20 to 30 feet, you're just amazed at what is under the surface of the ocean, and then what goes below that, it's a whole unknown field for us.
Yep. And the smaller and smaller things,
yeah.
They all have interesting lives. Yeah.
That's right. Well, fine. Well, let's see. Is there any other particular miscellaneous things you've undertaken, particularly for the government? I guess you've been called on dozens of times to help on different projects. Are there any that particularly stand out? You mentioned your We Talk experience and then the deep sea photography and so forth. Are there any others that we might have missed in your work with the government?
No, I can't think of the moment. But my attitude is to help everybody.
Yeah.
And I try not to learn too much about what they're doing, but where I can help, and then it's their problem, I go on to something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you've been marvelously successful in developing these techniques, and more important yet, bringing them to the point where they can actually be used successfully
by everybody.
By everybody, and that of course is a tribute to have.
And one of my students got out this book, Stopping Time, recently. Did you see that with the
I've heard the book. No, I haven't seen the book.
It's, he picked different pictures than I would. I pick the ones that are interesting to me.
Oh, yeah.
He picks the ones that are artistic or the ones that appeal to him. I took them, and so I'm still working on high-speed photography.
Oh, yeah.
Still, in fact, we're having a big conference at MIT. I think it starts next week.
Oh, yeah.
And I was, yesterday before I came down here, I'm preparing a new lecture on bullet photography. And I'll have about 40 people. I'll train them how to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's nothing to it, really.
Oh, yeah.
But you can stretch it out.
Right.
And they don't do it unless they're pushed into it.
Right.
As an educator, you have to learn how to make people do things.
Oh, yeah.
And that's my goal.
Right. Well, fine, then. Well, I think you've really covered a tremendous area of interest here today, and I certainly want to thank you very much for your...
Well, I'll give you this one picture, and this is a postcard. I had 100. I had 100 of these, and I've given all the way except this last one.
Oh, yes.
And, and on the back of it is a list of my books.
Oh.
See?
Well, fine.
So it serves a purpose. I'm not just giving you something for nothing. It's,
isn't this this fabulous one?
It's interesting. Because you do not conceive of the thing at all.
That's right.
And here it is.
Yeah, that's it. Well,
so if you can work those books in so people can know that they exist. Yeah. The big problem is how to get those into the library. How to get the high school kids to know that they're there.
Yeah, well, that's right.
And most libraries are run by literary people.
Yeah.
They're interested in Shakespeare and the art and
the
Bible and other classical things.
Oh, yeah.
And a book about how to take high-speed pictures of bugs and bullets and bugs and things is not in the.
That's right.
Not in there.
You don't find those.
So my goal is to make it possible. Well, nobody can come around and say, well, why didn't you tell me that you could do all these things? Well, it's there.
There's a wealth of things that are there as long as we make them available.
Make them available.
To our schools and libraries and other forms.
Right.
Well, very good. Well, again, thank you very much.
Well, congratulations on your goal.
A very, very enjoyable conversation, and as I've had it. And with this, I think we can conclude it, and I chop off the ending.
Okay.